The alarm sirens cut through the evening air like a knife. Kate dropped her data pad and ran to the window of the research station. Orange flames lit up the sky where the settlement stood, just 2 kilometers away across the valley. Her heart pounded in her chest as she watched the fires spread. "All personnel to evacuation pods now." His voice cracked through the intercom system. "This is not a drill. Hostile forces incoming." Kate grabbed her emergency pack and rushed into the hallway. Other researchers pushed past her, their faces white with fear. She had lived on 7 for 2 years, studying the people and their pack culture. The wolf-like aliens had been suspicious of humans at first, but Kate had spent countless hours sitting quietly near their territory, learning their language, respecting their boundaries. Slowly, they had begun to accept her presence. Now someone was attacking them. "Kate, move." Lisa grabbed her arm as they ran toward the evacuation bay. The medical officer's grip was tight. "The ships are loading. We have maybe 5 minutes." Through the station windows, Kate saw the attackers. Dark ships with red markings filled the sky. She recognized them from intelligence reports. The Empire. Raiders who captured alien species for experiments and slave labor. They had ignored this sector for years. Why come now? The answer hit her like a physical blow. The cubs. The pack had 3 young cubs this season. Raiders sold rare alien younglings for massive profits on black markets. "They're after the bobbies," Kate said, stopping in the middle of the corridor. Lisa pulled harder on her arm. "We can't help them. We barely have weapons. They will have to defend themselves." "The cubs can't defend themselves." Kate pulled free from Lisa's grip. "His youngest is barely weaned. He wanders off from the pack constantly." "Kate, don't be stupid." Lisa's voice rose with panic. "Ordered full evacuation. If we don't leave now, we die here." Kate looked at her friend's face, then back at the windows. Explosions bloomed in the distance. She thought about Little, the smallest cub she had ever seen among them. His gray fur was lighter than the others, his legs still too long for his body. He fell behind when the pack hunted. The older showed patience with him but struggled to keep up. She had watched him play just yesterday, pouncing on fallen leaves while his parent watched with what Kate had learned to recognize as affection. The big pack leader had noticed Kate observing and had not chased her away. That simple acceptance had meant everything to her research. "Go to the pods," Kate said quietly. "Tell I'm sorry." "Kate, no." Lisa reached for her again, but Kate was already running in the opposite direction, toward the emergency exit that led outside. "Kate, get back here." Kate hit the exit panel and the door hissed open. Hot air rushed in, thick with smoke. She pulled her breathing mask over her face and ran into the night. Behind her, she heard Lisa screaming her name, then the sound of explosion cut off everything else. The path to the settlement was rough. Kate had walked it 100 times in daylight, but never while the world burned around her. She jumped over fallen debris and dodged pieces of burning metal that fell from the sky. Her lungs burned despite the mask. Her legs screamed at her to stop. She kept running. The settlement was chaos. Adult warriors fought against armed raiders in powered armor. Energy weapons lit up the darkness. Kate saw leading the defense, his massive form moving between the attackers and the dens where the pack kept their young. There were fierce fighters, but they had primitive weapons against advanced technology. Kate ran along the edge of the fighting, staying low. She searched desperately for the cubs. 2 of them huddled together near an older female who guarded them with her body. But where was? A raider ship descended near the dens. Its boarding ramp dropped and armored soldiers poured out. They carried nets and stun weapons. This was a capture team. "No," Kate whispered. She scanned the area frantically. Then she saw him. Crouched alone behind a fallen tree, separated from the pack by the fighting. His small body trembled. He was trying to be brave, but fear made him freeze. A raider spotted him and started walking toward the cub with a capture net. Kate didn't think, she just moved. She sprinted across open ground, waving her arms. "Hey, over here." The raider turned toward her, confused by the human's sudden appearance. That moment of confusion was all Kate needed. She reached and scooped him into her arms. The cub yelped in surprise and fear, his claws scratching her jacket as he struggled. "It's okay," Kate said in the language, though her accent was terrible. "It's Kate. I've got you." Recognized her scent and stopped struggling, but his heart hammered against her chest. He weighed more than she expected. The cub was small for, but still nearly 20 kilograms of muscle and bone. The raider raised his weapon. Kate turned and ran, holding tight against her body. Energy blasts hit the ground near her feet. She zigzagged, her training from basic colony defense kicking in. Don't run straight. Stay unpredictable. Find cover. A massive explosion rocked the ground. Kate fell hard, rolling to keep from crushing. Pain shot through her shoulder where she hit a rock. The cub whimpered in terror. Above them, a raider ship's weapons charged up, targeting the area where the remaining cubs hid. The warriors saw it too and howled in rage and fear. They could not reach their young in time. Kate looked around desperately. 30 meters away stood the old research shelter she had used when first studying the. It was half buried in the hillside, built to withstand the planet's harsh storms. Not much, but better than nothing. "Hold on," she told, even though he could not understand her words. She hoped he understood her tone. Kate pushed herself up and ran toward the shelter. Every step jarred her injured shoulder. Behind her, she heard the raider ship's weapons powering up to full charge. The sound built like thunder before a storm. She had seconds, maybe less. She reached the shelter entrance and threw herself inside with still clutched to her chest. The world outside exploded into white fire. The blast wave hit the shelter like a giant's fist. The walls shook. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling. Kate curled her body around, making herself a shield between the cub and the collapsing entrance. Something heavy struck her back. Then another. Pain bloomed across her ribs. When the shaking finally stopped, Kate lay in darkness, barely able to breathe, squirmed beneath her, making frightened sounds. At least he was alive. She had done that much. Kate tried to move and gasped as pain shot through her entire body. Her back felt wet. Blood, probably. The shelter entrance was completely blocked. They were buried alive and the raiders were still out there hunting. She reached for her emergency beacon with shaking fingers and pressed the activation button. A small light blinked to life. Someone would come eventually. She just had to keep alive until then. The cub looked up at her with large, frightened eyes that glowed slightly in the beacon's dim light. Kate managed a smile despite the pain. "You're going to be okay," she promised him, not knowing if anyone would arrive in time to make those words true. The darkness pressed in from all sides. Kate could hear his rapid breathing and feel his small body trembling against hers. She forced herself to take inventory of her injuries despite the pain that screamed through every nerve. Her back was definitely bleeding. Something had hit her hard during the explosion, probably debris from the collapsing entrance. Her left shoulder felt wrong, possibly dislocated. 3 ribs on her right side sent sharp pain with every breath, but she was alive and, more importantly, so was. The emergency beacon's small light cast shadows on the buried shelter's walls. Kate pulled her medical kit from her belt with her good hand. The movement made her vision blur with pain, but she gritted her teeth and kept going. She had to check first. The cub watched her with wide eyes, his ears flat against his head in fear. Kate moved slowly, speaking softly and broken. "Let me see. Need to check hurt." His gray fur was singed in places, and a cut across his left foreleg oozed blood. Kate cleaned it carefully with antiseptic. The cub whined but held still, perhaps sensing she was trying to help. She wrapped the wound with bandage material, making it tight enough to stop the bleeding but not so tight it would hurt him. "Good," she said, stroking his head gently. "You're very brave." Made a small sound, almost like a question. His nose pressed against Kate's arm, sniffing. Then his ears went back again and he whined louder. Kate realized he could smell her blood. "I'm okay," she lied. The pain in her back was getting worse, not better. She could feel warmth spreading down her spine. Too much blood, but if she showed fear, would panic. Cubs took their cues from adults. She had learned that watching the pack. Kate pulled out a pain medication injector and pressed it against her thigh. The medicine would help, but it would also make her drowsy. She needed to stay awake, needed to keep calm. Outside the collapsed shelter, she could still hear sounds of fighting. Energy weapons fired in bursts. Warriors howled battle cries. Ships roared overhead. The raiders had not left yet. Even if rescue came, they would have to fight through the attack to reach this shelter. Hours might pass before anyone could dig them out. Days if the fighting continued. Kate looked at her medical supplies. She had enough to treat minor injuries, but not enough for her own wounds. The choice was simple. The cub's life mattered more than hers. "Tell you story," Kate said settling herself more comfortably despite the pain. "You listen, yes." Cocked his head, one ear perking up slightly. Cubs loved stories. Kate had watched parents share tales with their young around fires, teaching pack history through narrative. Kate's was clumsy and she knew her grammar was wrong, but she told him about Earth, about vast oceans and tall mountains, about animals that had never seen, describing them in simple terms, lions and wolves and eagles. She told him about human children who played in parks and learned to be brave, just like cubs. His breathing slowed as he listened. His body relaxed slightly against hers. Good. Fear would make everything worse. The beacon light flickered. Kate checked it and felt her stomach drop. Low battery. She had grabbed an old beacon in her rush to evacuate. It would die soon, leaving them in complete darkness. Before it failed, she needed to do something important. Kate reached up and unclipped the badge from her jacket collar. It was a simple thing, just a piece of metal with her name and credentials engraved on it. She had worn it every day since arriving on 7. It represented her life's work, her dedication to understanding alien cultures, her belief that all intelligent species deserved respect and protection. With fumbling fingers, Kate worked the badge's clip through his fur, attaching it to the thick fur around his neck like a collar. The cub squirmed and tried to see what she was doing. "This for you," Kate said softly. "So they know, so they find you." The badge caught the beacon's dying light. Kate's name reflected back at her. Kate. It seemed fitting that her name would stay with even if she did not. The beacon flickered one final time and went dark. Whimpered in the sudden blackness. Kate pulled him close, wrapping both arms around him despite the pain it caused. "I'm here," she promised. "Not leave you alone." Time lost meaning in the darkness. Kate drifted in and out of consciousness. Each time she woke, she checked on. The cub had fallen into an exhausted sleep, his small body warm against hers. She could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong. That was good. Her own heartbeat felt weaker. The cold was creeping in, even though the shelter should have been warm. She knew what that meant. Blood loss, shock. Her body was shutting down. Kate forced herself to stay awake a little longer. She needed to think clearly, needed to make sure would be found. With her remaining strength, she positioned herself between the cub and the blocked entrance. When rescuers dug through the debris, they would find her first. Her body would protect from any falling rocks or dangerous equipment they used to clear the way, and they would see her badge on him. They would know someone had tried to save the cub. They would know he was important. Kate's mind wandered to her family back on Earth, her parents who had worried about her living on a frontier world, her brother who had called her crazy for wanting to study aliens. They would be sad when they learned she died, but maybe they would understand when they learned why. She had died protecting an innocent life. That meant something. The fighting sounds outside had changed. Fewer energy weapons, more howling. Maybe they were winning. Maybe the raiders were retreating. Kate hoped so. She hoped and the pack survived. She hoped the other cubs were safe. stirred in his sleep making small sounds. Kate stroked his fur with weak fingers. "You're precious," she said in. The word came out slurred, but she meant it with her whole heart. "You matter, you're worth everything." The cub settled again, trusting her even in sleep. That trust was the most beautiful thing Kate had ever experienced. Two different species, divided by biology and culture and language, connected by something fundamental: the desire to protect the young, the instinct to keep innocence safe. Kate had spent her career studying what made species different. Now, at the end, she understood what made them the same. Love transcended words. Sacrifice needed no translation. Her vision was blurring now, even in the darkness. She could not see, but she could feel breathing. In and out, steady and alive, she had done it. Whatever happened next, she had saved him. Kate thought about her research notes, still stored in the station's database. 2 years of careful observation about culture and family structures. She had written about how protected their cubs at any cost, how the entire pack worked together to ensure the young survived. She had admired that about them. Now she had become part of that story, a human who protected a cub as if it were her own. The irony made her smile despite the pain. She had wanted to understand them. In the end, she had become more like them than she ever expected. "Guardian," Kate whispered, remembering the word for pack members who defended the young. She had learned it while watching mothers and fathers teach their cubs about pack roles. Being a guardian was the highest honor in culture. She hoped would remember her someday, hoped he would understand what she had tried to teach him in these final hours. That bravery meant protecting others, that kindness crossed all boundaries, that every life had value, no matter how small. Kate's breathing grew shallow. The cold had spread through her entire body now. She could barely feel her fingers anymore, but she kept them wrapped around, holding him safe. Her last thought was not of fear or regret. It was gratitude. Gratitude that she had been there in the right place at the right moment to save one small life. Gratitude that would survive because of her choice. Gratitude that her last act had meaning. Kate's heart beat once more, then stopped. Her body remained curved around the sleeping cub, a final shield against the world. The badge bearing her name glinted in the darkness around his neck, a promise that someone had loved him enough to die for him. In the silence of the buried shelter, the smallest cub of the pack slept on, protected by a guardian who would never wake. 3 days after the attack, led the search party through the ruins. The raiders had finally retreated when human military ships arrived from the nearest fleet station. The battle had been brutal. Half the warriors carried injuries, and 2 elders had fallen defending the pack, but they had driven the invaders away. Now came the terrible task of counting their losses. Stopped at the collapsed research shelter, where the human Kate had spent so many quiet hours watching the pack from a respectful distance. The pack leader's massive frame blocked the morning sun as he examined the pile of debris covering the entrance. His keen nose picked up 2 scents beneath the rocks. One human. "Here," called to the others. The search party rushed over, including several human survivors from the research station. Lisa pushed through the crowd, her medical bag clutched tight in both hands. "Is someone alive down there?" she asked, hope and fear mixing in her voice. Did not answer immediately. He lowered his head, listening with ears that could catch sounds humans never heard. After a long moment he straightened. One heartbeat, small, weak. The warriors began moving rocks with their clawed hands, working carefully to avoid causing further collapse. The humans helped, though their softer hands bled from the effort. Lisa stood at the edge, her face pale. She knew Kate had run toward the settlement. She had not seen her friend since. "Faster," commanded, his voice rough with worry. His smallest cub had been missing since the attack. If the cub was down there, every second mattered. They cleared the entrance layer by layer. Finally, a gap opened large enough to see inside, pushed forward and looked into the darkness. What he saw made him freeze. Kate's body lay curled around like a living shield. The human was clearly dead, her skin gray, her eyes closed. Blood stained her clothes and pooled beneath her, but her arms were still wrapped around the cub, protecting him even in death. Was alive. The tiny cub's chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. Around his neck, something metal glinted in the light streaming through the gap. The human saved him, one of the warriors whispered in their own language. She died keeping the cub safe. Made a sound deep in his throat, something between a howl and a whimper. He had lost pack members before. He understood death. But this was different. Kate was not. She had no blood obligation to protect, yet she had given her life for his cub without hesitation. "Get them out," ordered, his voice thick with emotion. "Both of them carefully." Lisa pushed through as soon as the opening was wide enough. She dropped into the shelter and immediately checked, her hands gentle despite her shaking. The cub was dehydrated and weak, but alive. She gave him water from her medical kit, and his eyes fluttered open. Then Lisa turned to Kate. She pressed her fingers against her friend's neck, knowing what she would find. No pulse. The body was cold. Kate had been dead for at least a day, maybe longer. "She gave him all her medical supplies," Lisa said, her voice breaking as she examined the scene. "Treated his wounds. Saved the pain medicine for herself so she could stay awake longer to keep him calm." Tears ran down her face. She knew she was dying, and she spent her last hours making sure he wouldn't be afraid. Appeared at the entrance above. The station commander's face was hard, trying to hold back his own grief. "Orders were to evacuate," he said quietly. She disobeyed. "She was right to disobey," Lisa snapped, looking up at him with fierce eyes. "Look at this cub. He would be dead or captured by raiders if Kate hadn't acted. She saw what needed to be done and she did it." She touched Kate's cold hand. "She was always braver than the rest of us." The warriors pulled out first, passing him gently too. The pack leader held his cub close, feeling the small heartbeat against his chest. Alive. His smallest cub was alive because of the human. Then they lifted Kate's body out with reverence. Would not let them put her on the ground. He directed them to carry her to the pack's sacred space, the area where they honored fallen warriors. Lisa protested. "We should take her back to the human colony. She deserves to go home to Earth." Turned to face her, his eyes holding hers. When he spoke, his accent was thick, but his words were clear. He had learned some human language from Kate over the years. "She saved Pack Cub. She is Pack now. We honor her our way." Started to argue, but Lisa put a hand on his arm. "Let them," she said softly. "Kate would have wanted this." They carried Kate's body to their ceremonial ground as the sun climbed higher, called the entire pack together. Even the wounded came, limping but determined to witness this moment. The human survivors followed, a small group of scientists who had never expected to participate in sacred rites. Stood before his pack within his arms. The cub was confused and weak, but alive. The badge around his neck caught the sunlight, Kate's name reflecting for all to see. "This human gave everything for my cub," said in the language, his voice carrying across the gathered pack. "She had no duty to us. We are not her species. Yet when danger came, she ran toward it, not away. She placed her body between death and the weakest among us. She died holding him safe." The pack listened in silence. This was unprecedented. Humans were strange to them, soft and weak compared to strength, but what Kate had done spoke louder than any physical power. "The human Kate showed true guardian spirit," continued. "She understood what it means to protect the young. She knew the pack law without being taught." He raised higher so all could see. "My cub lives because she chose his life over hers. That is the highest honor. That is perfect love." An elder female stepped forward. Her name was Myra, and she was the pack's keeper of traditions. "Guardian's funeral," she said solemnly. "It has been 30 generations since we gave this honor, but this human earned it. She died as the greatest warriors die, defending cubs." The pack voiced their agreement, a chorus of howls that echoed across the valley. The humans did not understand the words, but they felt the emotion behind the sounds. This was respect. This was recognition of sacrifice. They prepared Kate's body according to tradition. They washed her wounds and dressed her in clean cloth. They placed her on a platform of stones in the center of the ceremonial ground. Around her, they arranged weapons taken from fallen raiders, symbols that she had fought against enemies of the pack. Lisa brought Kate's personal items from her quarters at the research station. Her research notes, her photos from Earth, her collection of small stones she had gathered from around 7, carried her data pad, which contained 2 years of observations about culture. She wrote about you every day, said Tu, showing him the files. She believed you were more than simple creatures. She saw intelligence and emotion and family love. She wanted other humans to understand that. Took the data pad carefully in his clawed hands, handling it like something precious. She saw truly, he said. She understood pack. As sunset approached, the pack gathered in a circle around Kate's body. They howled together, a sound of mourning that carried for kilometers. The human survivors joined in with their own cries of grief. 2 species, completely different, united in sorrow for one who had bridged the gap between them. Still weak but growing stronger, wiggled free from his father's arms and walked on unsteady legs to Kate's side. The cub did not understand death yet, not fully. He pressed his nose against her hand, confused why she did not move, why she did not stroke his fur and tell him stories in her terrible accent. The badge around his neck swung forward, touching Kate's arm, looked at it, then at Kate, then back at the badge. Some understanding seemed to dawn in his young mind. This thing was hers. She had given it to him. Mine, said in the cub language, a possessive word that meant more than ownership. It meant belonging. It meant pack. He would not let anyone remove it. When Lisa tried gently to take it, thinking it should be returned to Kate's family, growled and backed away. Stopped Lisa with a gesture. Let him keep it, the pack leader said. It is his now. She gave it freely. He will carry her mark always. Lisa nodded, understanding. The badge was not just metal anymore. It was a bond, a promise, a reminder that Kate had seen as worth dying for. That night the pack held vigil around Kate's body. They shared stories of her patience, her gentleness, her determination to understand them despite the barriers of language and biology. The humans shared their own stories of her dedication, her compassion, her belief that all intelligent life deserved respect. Spoke last when stars filled the sky and moons rose over 7. We name her first guardian, he declared, first of another species to understand pack law, first to show that family is not blood alone, first to die for young. He looked around at both and humans. We remember her, always. Her name lives in our pack story. The next morning, they buried Kate in tradition, marking her grave with a carved stone that bore symbols meaning protector and pack member. Her human belongings they sent back to Earth with proper ceremony, but her memory stayed on 7, woven into the history of 2 species learning to trust each other. And wore her badge every day. A small cub who did not yet know his life would be shaped by the human who collapsed holding him close, keeping him safe until her last breath. 15 years changed everything and nothing at all. Stood at the edge of the valley, looking down at the settlement where both and humans now lived side by side. The badge around his neck had worn smooth from constant wear, Kate's name barely readable after so many years. He touched it with one clawed hand, a habit he had never broken. He was not the small, frightened cub anymore. At 15, stood as tall as most adult warriors, his gray fur darker now, his shoulders broad with muscle. He had trained in combat since he was old enough to hold a weapon. He had learned strategy, diplomacy, and leadership. But most importantly, he had learned both and human ways. You're thinking about her again, a voice said behind him. Turned to see Lisa approaching. The human medical officer had gray in her hair now, lines around her eyes. She had stayed on 7 after the attack, helping rebuild the relationship between species. "Always thinking about her," replied in perfect English. He had studied the human language intensively, driven by a need to understand the person who had saved him. "Today is the council meeting. Father is stepping down." Lisa nodded. "Has led well for many years. He earned his rest." She studied his face. "You're going to challenge for leadership." It was not a question. Lisa had watched grow up, had helped teach him about human culture while taught him traditions. She knew him as well as anyone. "The pack needs a leader who understands both our peoples," said. "The empire is expanding again. Trade routes are threatened. Colonies need protection." He looked down at the badge. "Kate showed us that cooperation makes us stronger, but some in the pack still resist. They say I am too influenced by humans." "Are you?" Lisa asked gently. Considered the question. Kate was the most of anyone I have known. She understood pack loyalty better than warriors born to it. She proved that courage and honor are not species-specific. He met Lisa's eyes. "If understanding that makes me too human, then those who criticize me understand nothing." Lisa smiled sadly. "She would be proud of you, you know that, right?" "I hope so," touched the badge again. "Come with me, I want to show you something before the council meeting." They walked together to the Human Archive building. It had been constructed 5 years ago, a shared space where both species stored important records. Led Lisa to a secured room in the back. Inside were Kate's complete research notes, preserved and displayed like sacred texts. Had read them all multiple times. He had seen himself described as a cub watched through Kate's observations as she documented his development and the pack's acceptance of her. "Look at this entry," said, pulling up a specific file on the display screen. "Written 2 weeks before the attack." Lisa read Kate's words aloud. "Is developing slower than his siblings, but I believe this is not weakness. He watches more carefully. He thinks before acting. These traits will serve him well if he survives to adulthood. The pack sometimes underestimates him because of his size, but I see potential for greatness. He has his father's courage and a gentleness that is rare among predator species. I find myself hoping he lives long enough to prove what he can become." His voice was rough with emotion. "She saw me, not just a research subject, not just another alien cub. She saw who I could be." "She did more than see you," Lisa said, putting a hand on his arm. "She believed in you enough to die for you. That kind of faith changes a person." "It made me responsible," said. "I carry her sacrifice every day. Everything I do must honor what she gave." They left the archive and walked toward the council grounds. A crowd had already gathered. Both and humans waited to witness the leadership challenge. This moment had been coming for months. Everyone knew would step forward. Stood in the center of the ceremonial circle, his fur now streaked with white. The old pack leader had fought off 2 challenges from younger warriors in recent years, but age was catching up with him. He had led the pack through the hardest times, forging peace with humans, defending against raiders, building a new future. Now it was time to pass on that responsibility. "Who challenges for leadership?" called out in the traditional words. Stepped into the circle. The badge around his neck caught the light and a murmur went through the crowd. Everyone knew that badge. It was part of his identity now, inseparable from who he had become. "I challenge," said clearly, his voice carrying to every listener. An older warrior named stepped forward as well. He was traditional, suspicious of humans, and believed the pack had grown too soft with cooperation. "I also challenge," announced. "The pack needs strength, not human friendship." Looked between them. 2 challengers, then you both must prove yourselves. Combat to submission, not death. The pack needs warriors, not corpses. Attacked first, using traditional fighting style. He was larger than, more experienced in pure physical combat. His claws raked out, seeking to force submission through overwhelming power. But had learned more than fighting. He had trained with human military advisors, studied tactics from a dozen species. He moved differently, using techniques that confused. When the older warrior expected strength, used speed. When anticipated tradition, applied innovation. The fight lasted longer than anyone expected, was strong and determined, fighting for what he believed was the pure way, but fought for something larger. He fought for Kate's vision, for a future where species worked together instead of remaining isolated. Finally saw his opening. He used a human grappling technique combined with strength, taking to the ground in a hold that gave the older warrior no room to escape. "Submit," said, not with anger but with respect. "You fought well, but the pack needs new thinking now." Struggled a moment longer, then went still. "I submit," he said through gritted teeth. Released him and helped him stand. "Your strength serves the pack," he said to in front of everyone. "I will need experienced warriors in the difficult days ahead. Will you stand with me?" The offer surprised everyone. Tradition said the winner dominated the loser, but was offering partnership instead. Stared at him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "You fight like no I have known. Perhaps that is what we need." Stepped forward and placed his hand on shoulder. "I recognize as pack leader," he declared. "The youngest to ever earn this position, but the right choice for these times." The pack voiced their acceptance, howls rising into the air. The humans in the crowd cheered their own way. It was a sound of hope, of two species celebrating together. But one older called out before the ceremony finished. "He wears human metal around his neck. How can he lead when he honors human symbols?" Silence fell. Everyone looked at, waiting for his response. Touched Kate's badge, feeling the worn metal under his fingers. When he spoke, his voice carried across the entire gathering. "This badge belonged to Kate, First Guardian. She was human, yes, but she was more in spirit than many born to our species." He looked around at all the faces, both human and— What makes someone pack? Is it biology, or is it action? Kate died protecting the weakest cub without hesitation, without expecting reward, without considering that we were different species. She saw a child in danger and she acted. That is pack law in its form. He held up the badge for all to see. "I wear this to remember that courage has no species, that family is defined by love, not blood, that the strong have a duty to protect the weak, whoever they are." He looked directly at the elder who had questioned him. Kate understood pack loyalty better than warriors who only know tradition. She lived it and died for it. If that makes me too human in your eyes, then perhaps you need to learn what it truly means to be. No one challenged his words. Even the most traditional warriors recognized truth when they heard it. Smiled a fierce expression of pride. "My cub has become a leader worthy of the pack. Kate would be proud." That night after the ceremonies finished, stood alone at Kate's grave. The carved stone marker still stood strong, symbols of protector and pack member clear in the moonlight. "I am pack leader now," he told the stone, speaking as if Kate could hear him. "I do not know if I am ready, but I will try to honor what you taught me. Cooperation over conflict, protection over power, understanding over fear." He touched the badge. "Thank you for seeing who I could become. I will spend my life proving you were right to die for me." The wind carried his words across the valley, where human and home stood side by side. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The empire was growing aggressive again. Colonies needed defense. Hard choices waited ahead. But tonight stood between two worlds, wearing a human's honor around his neck, leading a pack that had learned to embrace change. He was Kate's legacy, alive and strong, ready to protect those who could not protect themselves. The smallest cub had grown into a leader, and around his neck, her badge shone in the moonlight, a promise that her sacrifice had meaning, that her death had planted seeds of hope that would grow for generations. The warning came 3 months into his leadership. Empire ships had been spotted near the frontier colonies, more than any previous scouting mission. Intelligence reports suggested a major assault was being planned. Stood in the command center, a building that combined human technology with architectural style. Around him gathered both species leaders. Lisa represented the human civilian government. Commander Martinez led the human military forces stationed on 7, attended as elder advisor. Several warriors who led other packs had traveled from distant territories. 17 colonies are at risk, said, pointing to the star map display. They are targeting worlds with mixed populations. They want to prove that human cooperation is weak, that we cannot defend ourselves together. How many ships are coming? Asked a warrior named Senna, leader of the Northern Pack. Intelligence estimates between 40 and 60 warships, replied. We have maybe 20 vessels available in this sector, and most are patrol craft, not battle cruisers. Then we lose, said bluntly. The older warrior had accepted leadership, but he never sugar-coated reality. Battle fleets are designed for overwhelming force. We lack numbers. We lack their numbers, corrected, but we have advantages they do not expect. He moved to the display, his clawed hand manipulating the controls with practiced ease. Fight in standard formation. Massive ships in direct assault. They rely on superior firepower and heavy armor. Which they have, Senna pointed out. What advantage do we claim? Touched the badge at his neck, a gesture that had become automatic when he needed to think clearly. Kate saved my life using what they considered weakness. She was smaller, softer, less armed than any raider, but she understood something they did not, that protecting others gives you strength beyond physical power. I don't see how sentiment defeats warships, another leader said skeptically. Not sentiment, said. Strategy. Fight in packs using coordination and terrain. Humans fight with technology and long-range planning. Separately, we are weaker than, together, we become something they cannot predict. Lisa leaned forward. What are you proposing? Integrated defense, said. Warriors on human ships. Human technology supporting ground forces. Combined tactics they have never seen. We make our diversity our weapon. The Galactic Council will never approve military integration that quickly, protested. The bureaucracy alone would take months. Then we do not ask permission, said. We act. When it works, when we save lives, they will accept what we have built. He looked around at all the leaders. Kate disobeyed orders to save one cub. That disobedience changed 2 species. Sometimes doing right matters more than following rules. The room fell silent. Everyone understood the risk. If they failed, they would be blamed for reckless action. If they succeeded, they might change how the galaxy viewed cross-species cooperation. Spoke into the silence. My son learned from the human who died for him. She showed him that rules matter less than results, that protecting the weak is always right, even when authority says otherwise. The old pack leader looked at each person in the room. I support this plan. Kate's sacrifice should mean something. Let it mean a new way of fighting, a new way of protecting our peoples. One by one, the other leaders agreed. Even the skeptical ones could not argue with logic. Desperate times required bold action. The next weeks were chaos. Warriors trained on human ships, learning to operate in zero gravity and tight corridors. Human soldiers learned hunting tactics, how to coordinate silent attacks and use pack communication signals. Engineers worked overtime integrating weapons systems with human defensive technology. Lisa coordinated medical teams, combining human and healing knowledge. She found late one night in the archive building, reading Kate's notes again. Nervous? She asked, sitting beside him. Terrified, admitted. Kate saved one life. I'm trying to save 17 colonies. What if I fail? What if my plan gets people killed? Kate was terrified too, Lisa said gently. I saw her face before she ran toward the fighting. She was absolutely scared, but she ran anyway. She touched the badge around his neck. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite fear because something matters more. She matters more, said quietly. Her memory, her belief that species can work together. If I fail, I prove the skeptics right. That cooperation is weakness, that we should stay separate. You won't fail, Lisa said with certainty. You know why, because you are not doing this alone. You are building on what Kate started. She saved you. You grew strong. Now you save others. That is how legacies work. One act of courage inspires more courage. The attack came 2 weeks later, exactly as intelligence predicted. 47 warships dropped out of hyperspace near the frontier colonies. Their commander sent the standard demand for surrender, confident that inferior forces would submit without fight. Instead, they found something unexpected. Human ships did not engage in direct combat. They used hit-and-run tactics, drawing vessels into specific areas. There, warriors waited on hidden platforms, attacking from blind spots that sensors did not expect. The wolf-like aliens boarded enemy ships through damaged hull sections, fighting in close quarters where armor was less effective. On the ground, human soldiers used tracking skills to predict enemy landing patterns. They set ambushes that combined human explosive technology with pack hunting strategies. They found themselves fighting an enemy that did not follow standard military doctrine. Led from the front, commanding a mixed unit of both species. He wore light armor that accommodated his form but included human communication systems. Kate's badge hung visible on his chest, catching light even in the chaos of battle. During the heaviest fighting, his unit was pinned down protecting a civilian evacuation site. 3 troop carriers landed nearby, disgorging soldiers in powered armor. The odds were impossible. Had 30 fighters against over 100 enemies. "We cannot win this," said, fighting beside his pack leader. "We should retreat, save who we can." Looked at the evacuation ships behind them, still loading families with young children. Both human and cubs scrambled aboard, their parents desperate to get them to safety. He saw one small human girl, maybe 5 years old, crying for her mother who was helping others board. The badge on his chest seemed to grow heavier. He remembered being that small, that scared. He remembered Kate's arms around him, protecting him even as she died. "No," said, "we hold. Every second we buy is another life saved." "We will die," warned. "Then we die protecting cubs," replied. "That is pack law, that is what Kate taught me. The strong protect the weak, always." He opened communication to all units. "This is Pack Leader. I need immediate support at Evacuation Site 3. We have civilians, including young, under direct threat. I am not asking for volunteers. I am telling you that we hold this position because there is no other choice. Kate died holding one cub. We will not abandon hundreds." The response was immediate. Ships changed course. Ground units pushed harder through enemy lines. Both human and forces responded to the call, not because of orders, but because words touched something fundamental. Commander's voice crackled over the communication system. "This is Martinez. My ship is 2 minutes out. We are coming in hot. Keep those cubs safe." "Incoming from the north," added a warrior leading another pack. "We will hit their flank. Hold position." The next 2 minutes were the longest of his life. His unit fought with desperate courage, taking losses but refusing to give ground. He saw humans pull wounded to safety. He watched warriors shield injured human soldiers with their own bodies. The integration he had proposed was not just tactical now. It was personal. They were protecting each other because they were pack. When reinforcements arrived, they were caught between multiple forces. The battle turned. The evacuation ships launched successfully, carrying hundreds of civilians to safety. Stood among the wounded and exhausted fighters, both species sitting together in the aftermath. The small human girl he had seen earlier was safe, already off-planet with her mother. She would never know how close she had come to death, or that a pack leader had refused to retreat because he remembered being a scared cub once. The badge on his chest was scorched from weapons fire but still intact. He touched it with a bloodied hand. "We did it, Kate," he whispered. "We held." The battle for the frontier lasted 3 more days. They had expected quick victory against divided forces. Instead, they found coordinated resistance that used tactics they could not counter. Human precision combined with ferocity. Technology merged with instinct. The raiders had fought humans before. They had fought before. They had never fought both working as one. On the fourth day, the fleet retreated, having lost over half their ships. The frontier colonies were saved. The Galactic Council could not ignore what had happened. Representatives came to Seven to investigate how such a small defensive force had defeated a major assault. They expected to find some new weapon or secret technology. Instead, they found and his integrated units, human and standing together, wearing mixed insignia, speaking each other's languages. Warriors who had bled for each other and would do so again without hesitation. The council had no choice but to recognize the formal alliance. More than that, they asked to expand his model to other frontier worlds. 6 months after the battle, stood before a new class of recruits. 100 beings from a dozen species had come to learn the integrated defense tactics that had saved the frontier. Humans and others stood in rows, waiting to begin training. Walked among them, his presence commanding respect. The badge around his neck was famous now, its story known across multiple systems. Everyone knew about Kate, the human who died protecting a cub. Everyone knew that cub had grown into the leader who saved 17 colonies. "You are here to learn how to fight together," began, his voice carrying across the training ground. "But first you must understand why we fight. Not for territory, not for resources, not for glory." He touched Kate's badge. "We fight to protect those who cannot protect themselves. That is the only purpose that matters." He told them Kate's story, how she ran into danger when everyone else fled, how she gave her life for a cub that was not her species, not her responsibility, not her problem by any traditional definition. How her sacrifice had planted a seed that grew into something greater than she could have imagined. "Kate taught me that true strength is measured by what you protect, not what you conquer," said. "She showed me that family is not defined by biology, that courage means acting despite fear, that one person in one moment can change the course of history." He looked at each recruit, meeting their eyes regardless of species. She collapsed holding the smallest cub. "Now we stand together wearing her honor, teaching others to do the same. When you face impossible odds, when everything says to retreat, remember this. Someone died believing that every life matters. That belief is stronger than any weapon. That belief is what we defend." A young human recruit raised her hand. "Sir, what did Kate say before she died?" Touched the badge, feeling the worn metal that had traveled with him through everything. She said 3 words in the language. "You are precious." She said it to a small, frightened cub who could barely understand, but those words meant everything. They meant I mattered, that my life had value, that someone cared enough to die for me. He looked up at all the recruits. "That is what we give to every being we protect, the knowledge that they are precious, that their life matters, that we will stand between them and death, just as Kate stood for me." The training began the next day. The recruits learned human tactics and pack hunting. They learned to communicate across language barriers and trust beings who looked nothing like them. They learned that the Guardian Order was not just a military unit. It was a philosophy, a way of seeing the galaxy. 1 year later, the Guardian Order had expanded to 50 frontier worlds. The Empire had ceased raids in sectors where Guardians operated, unwilling to face integrated defense forces. Other species began requesting training, seeing the effectiveness of cooperation. And on 7, where it all began, a new monument was unveiled. It stood beside Kate's grave, a statue showing a human woman holding a small cub, her body curved protectively around him. The badge around the statue cub's neck was real metal, donated by himself. A replica, created so the original could remain where it belonged, around the neck of the leader Kate had died to save. The inscription read simply, "She collapsed holding the smallest among us. Now we stand together, wearing her honor, protecting all who need protection. First Guardian Kate, who taught two species to become one pack, stood before the monument at sunset, as he did every year on the anniversary of Kate's death. He was older now, scars from many battles marking his fur, but the badge was still around his neck, worn smooth but never forgotten. "We did it," he said to the statue, to Kate's memory, to the promise he had made so many years ago. "Your death meant something. It meant everything. Cubs across a dozen worlds sleep safely because you taught us that species does not matter, that love transcends all boundaries, that the smallest life is worth the greatest sacrifice." The wind carried his words across the valley, where human and home stood together in peace, where children of both species played together without fear, where Kate's sacrifice had become the foundation of a new way of living. The smallest cub had become the greatest leader, and around his neck her badge caught the setting sun, a promise kept, a legacy fulfilled, a love that death could not diminish.